Hello, everyone, and welcome to Midnight Whispers. I know many of you listen to these stories to relax and slowly fall asleep. Before we begin, feel free to leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from tonight. If you enjoy these stories, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Now, get comfortable, take a slow breath, and let's begin. I was 7 years old, living in a small rural town in Utah, the kind of place where Main Street really was Main Street. There weren't many distractions, especially at night. When the sun went down, everything felt quieter and slower, like the world itself was settling into sleep. That night, I was staying over at my grandparents' house, a place that always felt both familiar and slightly mysterious to me. Their house had its own smells, its own sounds, and a basement that felt like a world separate from the rest of the home. I didn't want to sleep. I rarely did at that age. Sleep felt like wasted time, especially when my imagination was wide awake. Around midnight, when the house had gone completely still, I slipped out of bed and made my way down to the basement. The stairs creaked softly under my feet, but no one stirred. The basement light flicked on with a quiet hum, revealing a wide open space that felt huge to a kid my size. That's where I kept my toys. I grabbed my Matchbox cars and my favorite building blocks, the glowing better blocks that lit up softly when the lights were low. I loved those blocks because they made everything feel alive. Like the city I built wasn't just pretend. I spread everything out on the floor and started setting up what I called Night City. It was a little metropolis of my own design, full of roads, buildings, and imaginary traffic patterns that only made sense to me. I was completely absorbed in it, making engine noises, moving cars from one glowing building to another, when I became aware that I wasn't alone anymore. I didn't hear footsteps. I didn't hear the stairs. I just noticed someone standing nearby. It was my uncle. At least that's who he said he was, and at the time, I didn't question it. He looked like a normal adult man, calm and relaxed, dressed simply. Nothing about him felt scary or out of place. If anything, he felt familiar in a way I couldn't explain. He smiled at me, the kind of easy smile that makes you feel comfortable right away, and asked what I was playing. I told him about Night City. He sat down on the floor with me like it was the most natural thing in the world. He picked up one of the cars and asked which one he could drive. I handed him the Lincoln because he said that was his favorite. I remember that detail clearly, not because it seemed strange, but because it felt important in the moment. He didn't hesitate or joke about it. He just took the Lincoln and started driving it through the city like he'd done it 100 times before. We played like that for a long time, at least an hour, maybe more. Time didn't feel real down there. We talked about the city, about where the cars were going, about trains that passed near towns like ours. He told me small things, nothing dramatic, just stories that felt gentle and easy. And I don't remember him asking many questions about me. It felt more like he was there to keep me company than anything else. I need to explain something here. My great-uncle had died when I was 2 years old. At 7, I didn't fully understand what that meant in a deep way. But I knew enough to know that people who died didn't come over to play. I had never met him, not really. He wasn't talked about in my family. He was what you'd call the black sheep. There were family issues, old arguments, numb things adults didn't explain to kids. As far as I knew, he simply wasn't part of our lives. And yet, there he was. At least someone who said he was my uncle. Eventually, he stood up and said he had to go. He told me it was getting late and that he didn't want to miss his train. That line didn't strike me as strange at all. In my mind, adults went places, and sometimes they left late at night. I accepted it without question. He smiled at me again, told me I did a good job building Night City, and walked toward the back door of the basement. I watched him leave, then gathered up my cars, turned off the light, and went upstairs to sleep. There was no fear, no confusion, just the feeling that I'd had a good time. The next morning, everything felt normal. At breakfast, I casually asked my grandparents when Uncle was coming back so we could play again. The room went quiet. Not shocked quiet, but uncomfortable quiet. My grandparents exchanged looks that I didn't understand at the time, and they asked me which uncle I meant. I told them the one who played cards with me last night. That's when their discomfort turned into something closer to offense. They said they hadn't seen him since before I was born. They said he wasn't welcome in their home and that they wanted nothing to do with him. I didn't understand why they were upset. I tried to explain, telling them exactly what we played and showing them the Lincoln car he drove in my city. That made things worse. They looked uneasy, almost shaken, but they brushed it off quickly. They said I must have imagined it, that kids have vivid imaginations, especially when they stay up too late. They changed the subject, and I learned, even at that young age, that this was something they didn't want to talk about. So I didn't. But I never forgot. Years passed. I grew up. Life moved on. That night became one of those strange childhood memories you keep tucked away, unsure what to do with it. I never believed it was a ghost. I still don't. I've always been a skeptical person. I don't jump to supernatural explanations easily. I believe memories can be tricky, and children can fill in gaps without realizing it. And yet, as I got older, I learned things that made that memory harder to dismiss. I found out that my great-uncle had worked for Union Pacific. He drove trains. That was his job for years. I learned that he owned a Lincoln MK7, the same type of car he chose without hesitation in my Night City. No one had ever told me that. His name wasn't spoken in the family. His life wasn't shared in stories or photographs. There was no reason for me to know those details. But somehow, 7-year-old me did. I didn't know what a Lincoln MK7 was at that age. I just knew that car was his favorite. I didn't know what Union Pacific was. I just knew he needed to leave so he wouldn't miss his train. Those details only gained meaning later when I had context for them. Even now, I don't claim to know what happened that night. I don't say it was a ghost or a visitation or anything like that. All I know is that I remember it clearly. I remember the basement, the glow of the blocks, the sound of cars rolling across the floor. I remember a man who was kind, patient, and completely real to me in that moment. He didn't vanish. He didn't fade away. He didn't do anything dramatic. He simply left out the back door. That's the part that stays with me the most. Not fear, not confusion, but how ordinary it felt. Like a visit that ended naturally. Like someone stopping by, spending time, and then moving on because they had somewhere else to be. To this day, I can still see Night City in my mind. I can still see the Lincoln moving through the glowing streets, and I can still hear him telling me goodbye, calm and gentle, like he knew exactly when it was time to go. Whatever happened that night, it left an impression that never faded. And even though I don't believe in ghosts, I don't have a better explanation for how a 7-year-old kid knew things he had no way of knowing. About a man he was never supposed to meet, who was never spoken of, and who, according to everyone else, had been gone for years. Whenever I get sick, something strange happens to me. It doesn't matter if it's a mild cold or a full-blown flu. Every time my body weakens, my sleep changes, and with it comes the same nightmare. It has followed me for as long as I can remember, repeating itself with such consistency that it feels less like a dream and more like something waiting for me the moment I close my eyes. For context, my room has always been a little chaotic. I have a metal bed frame that creaks if I move too much, and I've never been the neatest person. Clothes end up on the floor, books pile up where they don't belong, and my closet is usually more of a storage space than an organized place. That mess has always felt normal to me, comforting even. But in my dreams, it becomes something else entirely. Whenever I'm sick, the same dream starts the same way. I find myself lying in bed, unable to move. I'm aware of my surroundings, aware of my own body, but completely frozen. My room looks exactly the way it does in real life, down to the smallest details. The lighting is dim, heavy, like the air itself has weight. Sitting on the metal frame at the foot of my bed is a woman. She looks like she's in her 30s, though it's hard to tell for sure. Her black hair is long and horribly tangled, clumped together as if it hasn't been brushed or washed in years. Her skin looks wrong. It's pale in some places, dark in others, and covered in patches that resemble fungus, like mold growing on damp walls. It looks sick, decaying, but still alive. Her eyes are the worst part. They glow silver, not bright like headlights, but dull and cold, reflecting just enough light to make sure I can't ignore them. She never smiles. She never frowns. She doesn't blink or breathe in any way I can notice. She just sits there, completely still, watching me. Hours seem to pass. I know it's a dream, but it doesn't feel like one. Time stretches endlessly. My body aches from not being able to move. My mind screams for me to wake up, to do something, anything, but I can't. She never touches me. She never speaks. She just watches, like she's waiting for something to happen. Toward the end of the dream, something always changes. Her face begins to shift, slowly, painfully, like wet clay being molded by invisible hands. The tangled hair becomes familiar. The shape of her face sharpens into something I recognize. And then I realize that she is becoming me. In the final moments, I'm no longer lying in the bed. I'm standing where she was, looking down at my own body, watching myself trapped and helpless. That's when I usually wake up. Except one time I didn't. There was one time when I was extremely sick, sicker than usual. All I could do was sleep. My body felt heavy, feverish, disconnected from itself. I drifted in and out of consciousness for hours, sometimes days, barely aware of what was real. That was the time when the dream changed. I went to sleep, expecting the woman again. Instead, I woke up unable to breathe. At least that's what it felt like. Something was sitting on my chest, crushing the air out of my lungs. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. I tried to move my arms, my legs, even my fingers, but nothing responded. The only part of me I could control were my eyes. Panic flooded my mind as I realized I was completely pinned down. When I forced my eyes open, I saw it. A gargoyle was sitting on my chest. It was heavy, solid, crouched low like a predator. Its skin looked like rough stone, cracked and aged, and its face was twisted into a permanent snarl, its claws pressed into me, keeping me completely immobilized. I could feel its weight, feel the pressure, feel the fear pounding through my body. I tried to look away, but I couldn't. My eyes were forced toward my closet. The closet door was open, and the inside looked exactly the way it had when I went to sleep. Every detail was right. The clothes were piled where I left them. Socks were scattered across the floor in the same careless way. Nothing was rearranged, nothing distorted. It looked like real life, not a dream version of it. That's what made it worse. Standing inside the closet was something far taller than any human should be. It had to be at least 7 feet tall. Its body was broad and unnatural, covered in dark, rough skin. Its eyes glowed yellow, sharp and intelligent in a way that made my stomach twist. Long claws extended from its hands, curved and thick, capable of tearing through flesh with ease. Massive red wings folded behind its back. The membranes stretched tight between spikes that jutted out like weapons. Its head was the most terrifying part. It looked like a dragon's head, elongated and angular, with a mouth full of teeth that looked far too real. When it moved, the sound of its joints shifting felt loud in the silence of the room. It stepped forward, slowly, deliberately. Each step brought it closer to my bed. The gargoyle on my chest didn't move, didn't need to. It was only there to keep me helpless, to make sure I couldn't look away, couldn't escape. I wanted to close my eyes. I wanted to wake up. I wanted to scream for my parents. But my body betrayed me completely. The demon stepped closer and closer until it was standing right beside my bed. I could see every detail of its face, every ridge and shadow. Its yellow eyes locked onto mine, and I felt like it was looking through me, not at me. And then I woke up screaming. I bolted upright in my bed, gasping for air, my chest aching as if something had really been sitting on it. My throat burned from the scream I hadn't been able to release in the dream. The room was empty. The closet was just a closet again. No gargoyle. No demon. Just me, shaking and soaked in sweat. I didn't tell anyone right away. Days passed before I finally told my dad about it. I tried to explain it as calmly as I could, though my voice still shook when I described the details. I told him about the paralysis, the gargoyle, the demon in the closet. I expected him to tell me it was just a nightmare, maybe stress or fever-induced hallucinations. Instead, his face went pale. After a long pause, he told me something that made my blood run cold. He said he had the same dream years ago, not something similar, not something vaguely close. The same dream. He described the demon before I could finish, using the same words I had, the same height, the same yellow eyes, the same red wings with spikes, the same dragon-like head. The only difference was what happened to him. In his dream, the demon didn't stop at the bed. It tried to drag him underground, pulling him down into the floor as if the earth itself had opened beneath him. When my mom overheard the conversation, she confirmed it. She said that years ago he had described that exact demon to her after waking up terrified. She remembered the details because they had disturbed her so deeply. That confirmation made everything feel real in a way I wasn't prepared for. To this day, I don't know what to think of it. I don't know if it's something connected to illness, something genetic, something psychological, or something far stranger. All I know is that whenever I get sick, I dread going to sleep. Because I know that somewhere between waking and dreaming, something is waiting, watching. And sometimes it feels like it knows exactly who I am. I was really young when this happened. If I had to guess now, I'd say I was somewhere between 8 and 10 years old. But that's only a rough estimate. At that age, days and years blur together, but certain moments stay sharp, frozen in place. This is one of those moments. It's not dramatic, not violent, not even especially frightening in a typical sense. But it's the one memory from my childhood that I've never been able to fully explain, no matter how many logical angles I look at it from. At the time, I shared a bedroom with my younger brother. The room itself was unusually large for a kid's bedroom, wide and open, with a lot of unused space. For reasons I honestly can't remember, we decided to place our bunk beds right in the middle of the room instead of against a wall. The long side of the bunk bed faced the doorway, which meant that from the top bunk, I had a clear view of anyone who entered the room. I slept on the top bunk, while my brother took the bottom. Every weekday morning followed the same routine. Our mom would come into our room to wake us up for school. It was never a gentle process. To me, waking up for school always felt abrupt and unfair, like being pulled out of a much better place before I was ready to leave it. Even now, that feeling of dread tied to early mornings is something I remember vividly. On this particular morning, though, things were already different before anything strange happened. I was awake. I don't remember why I woke up early. There was no loud noise, no bad dream, no clear reason. I was just lying there, staring into the darkness, my mind half active, half drifting. The room was quiet, and it was still dark outside. Depending on the time of year, that wouldn't have been unusual. In winter especially, it was often pitch black when we got up for school. At the time, the darkness didn't seem strange or alarming. I was lying on my back, completely still, I watching the doorway without really thinking about it. Then the door opened. It wasn't sudden or forceful. It opened the way a door normally does when someone familiar enters a room. I didn't hear footsteps beforehand, but that wasn't unusual either. Our house was quiet in the mornings and sound carried strangely. Turning my gaze toward the door took almost no effort. I was already looking in that direction. Standing in the doorway was a woman. She was wearing some kind of white gown or long dress. It wasn't something I recognized, and I don't remember ever seeing my mother wear anything like it, before or after. Still, my first assumption was that it was her. That's what made sense. She was the one who came in every morning. There was no reason to think it would be anyone else. The woman stepped fully into the room and closed the door behind her. The sound of the door clicking shut was soft but clear. Then she started walking toward the bunk beds, slow and steady, not rushing, not sneaking. Everything about her movement felt calm and deliberate. I watched her approach without feeling afraid. I didn't feel threatened or panicked. I felt mildly annoyed, the way kids do when they know they're about to be told to get up. She kept walking closer until she was right beside the bunk bed. From where I was, on the top bunk, the angle worked against me. Once she got close enough, I couldn't see her anymore. My view was blocked by the edge of the bed and the railing. At that point, I assumed she was going to wake my brother first, like she usually did. So I did what kids do. I shut my eyes and pretended to be asleep. I wanted to delay the moment, even if only by a few seconds. I lay there very still, trying to slow my breathing, waiting to hear her voice or feel her hand shake the bed or call my brother's name. I waited for the familiar sounds of a morning routine. Nothing happened. I kept my eyes closed. Seconds passed, then more seconds, then what felt like a full minute, maybe longer. The silence began to feel wrong, too heavy, too empty. I finally opened my eyes. The room looked exactly the same as it had before. Still dark, still quiet. The door was closed. That part stood out immediately. If my mom had come in and woken my brother, she would have left the door open. Or at least I would have heard it open again. Confused, I leaned over the railing of the top bunk to look down. There was no one there. The space beside the bed was empty. My brother was still asleep. unmoving, completely undisturbed. No sign that anyone had entered the room at all. That's when fear finally hit. It wasn't a sharp, immediate terror. It was a slow, creeping realization that something didn't add up. My heart started pounding, and my thoughts raced, trying to catch up with what I had just seen. I pulled my blankets up over my head, me covering myself completely, like that could somehow protect me. I lay there, frozen, listening for any sound, any movement, any sign that someone was still in the room. Nothing happened. I stayed like that for what felt like a long time, long enough for my fear to exhaust itself. Eventually, despite everything, I fell asleep. When I woke up later, the morning felt normal again. The sun was up. The house was alive with the usual sounds. My mom woke us up like she always did. I didn't mention what had happened. I didn't even fully know how to explain it. At that age, some things feel easier to ignore than to question. As I got older, I thought about it more. I've gone over that morning in my head countless times, replaying every detail, looking for something I missed. I don't believe in ghosts. I never have. Even now, I'm convinced there's a rational explanation. Maybe it really was my mom, and she left without making a sound. Maybe I drifted into a light dream while already awake, the kind where reality and imagination overlap just enough to confuse you. It's possible I imagined the entire thing. The human brain is especially strange in that half-awake state. Memory is unreliable, especially childhood memory. I know all of this. I've read about it. I've tried to apply logic to it. And yet something about that moment doesn't fit neatly into any explanation. I remember the way the door closed. I remember the calm certainty I felt that someone was there. I remember the timing, the waiting, the absence of sound where there should have been something. Most of all, I remember the confusion, the feeling of my understanding of the situation slipping just slightly out of alignment with reality. It's not a dramatic story. There was no screaming, no running, no shadowy figure standing over my bed. Nothing followed me. Nothing happened afterward. That moment never repeated itself. It's just a single, quiet memory. But it's the only strange thing from my childhood that I can't fully explain away. The only moment where logic feels just a little thinner than I'd like it to be. Even now, all these years later, I can still picture the doorway, the white gown, and the feeling of waiting for something that never came. I don't know what happened that morning, and maybe that's all there is to it. Sorry to interrupt for just a moment. If you're new here, consider subscribing to Midnight Whispers for daily true horror stories that stay with you long after they're told, quietly unsettling and meant for the late hours. You can also turn on notifications so you're always here when a new story arrives and the night begins to stir again. Now, let's continue. This is one of those experiences that has stayed with me since I was a kid. Not because it was dramatic or loud, but because of how deeply it unsettled me. It's the kind of memory that never really fades. It doesn't come back in flashes or nightmares. It just sits quietly in the back of my mind, unchanged, waiting. Even now, I can still picture it clearly. And the feeling it gave me is just as sharp as it was back then. I grew up in a house that always felt a little off. It wasn't falling apart or obviously creepy. It was a normal family home, lived in and familiar. But there was one object in it that never felt right. My parents owned this bust, a sculpture of a head and shoulders, meant to represent a Native American man. It was the kind of thing you might expect to see in an antique shop or someone's den decades ago. It was extremely stereotypical in its design, almost exaggerated, and made of a cold bronze-like material. From the moment I became aware of it as a child, I hated it. It sat in a spot that made it impossible to avoid. For years, my bedroom was located just down the hallway from where that bus stood. Every time I walked past it, day or night, I felt its presence. It wasn't just that it looked unsettling. There was something about it that felt wrong in a way I didn't have the words for back then. It felt like it didn't belong in the house, like it was out of place, not just physically, but on some deeper level. I was convinced it watched me. Not in the vague way people sometimes say, paintings follow you with their eyes. This felt different. It felt intentional. I could be walking down the hall, focused on something else, and suddenly feel that familiar prickle on the back of my neck. That instinctive sense of being observed. Every time I looked up, my eyes went straight to the bust. I tried to explain it to myself rationally, even as a kid. I told myself it was just my imagination, that the shadows in the hallway made it look like its eyes shifted. But deep down, I knew that wasn't it. The feeling never went away. If anything, it grew stronger as I got older. Then one night, something happened that removed any doubt I had. I was coming home late from the movies. I don't remember what we saw, only that it was late enough for my parents to already be asleep. The house was dark and quiet in that heavy way it gets at night, when every sound feels louder because everything else has gone still. I came in through the front door as quietly as I could, not one to wake anyone. As I walked down the hallway toward my room, I felt it. That same sensation of being watched, stronger than it had ever been before. I looked up, and the bust was staring at me. It wasn't just facing my direction, it was focused. Its eyes were locked onto mine with an intensity that made my stomach drop. The bronze surface looked colder than ever, dull and lifeless, and yet somehow alive. It wasn't looking at my face so much as it was looking through me, into me. It felt like it was staring directly into my soul. I stopped walking without even realizing it. Then it blinked. I don't mean it looked like it blinked. I don't mean the shadows shifted or my eyes played a trick on me. Its eyelids closed and opened again, slow and deliberate, like it wanted me to be sure I saw it. Before my brain could even process that, its mouth moved, just slightly, but unmistakably. I froze, my body completely locked up. I couldn't move my legs, I couldn't raise my arms, I couldn't scream. I tried to inhale and my chest barely responded. All I could do was stare back at it, locked in place, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might give me away somehow. The feeling coming off that thing was overwhelming. I have never felt such pure malice in my life. Not fear, not anger, but something colder and heavier. Evil intent is the only way I know how to describe it. It radiated outward, filling the hallway, pressing against me like a physical force. It felt ancient, patient, and cruel. Whatever it wasn't curious about me. It wasn't surprised to see me. It knew I was there. Time stopped making sense. I don't know how long I stood there. It could have been seconds or minutes. All I know is that eventually, my body allowed me to move again. The paralysis loosened just enough for me to turn and run. I didn't look back. I didn't stop. I ran straight to my room and slammed the door behind me, my hands shaking so badly I could barely grab the handle. I didn't sleep that night. I sat there, wide awake, listening to every sound the house made, waiting for something else to happen. Nothing did. Morning eventually came, pale light seeping through the windows like nothing had changed. I never told my parents what I saw. I didn't know how. I was terrified they wouldn't believe me, or worse, that they would brush it off like it was nothing. But I knew what I saw. From that night on, the feeling around the bust became unbearable. Walking past it felt like stepping into the gaze of something hostile. I avoided looking at it whenever I could. When I had to pass it, I kept my eyes down and moved quickly, my heart racing every time. I never saw it move again, but I never stopped feeling watched. Years passed. Life moved on in the way it always does. I grew older. Other things demanded my attention. The bust remained unchanged, still standing there in the house, still wrong. Then, some years later, my parents died. Losing them was devastating, and in the aftermath, the house was sold. Everything inside it was either taken, sold, or discarded. I never found out what happened to the bust. Part of me wishes I knew. Another part of me is relieved that I don't. I tell myself that it was probably thrown away, smashed, or left to rot in some landfill, buried under trash where it can't stare at anyone ever again. That thought gives me a strange sense of peace. I don't believe in curses. I don't believe in haunted objects. I don't believe in ghosts. But I also know that some experiences don't fit neatly into what we're comfortable believing. I know what I felt that night. I know what I saw. And I know that whatever that thing was, it wasn't just a statue. It wasn't just metal and shadow and imagination. It felt aware. It felt hostile. It felt like it had been waiting. That house is gone from my life now, and so is that object. Still, sometimes when I think about it too long, I get that same familiar feeling at the back of my neck, that sense of being watched. And I remind myself that whatever it was, it no longer has a place in my world, and I hope it never finds another one. This happened to me when I was 9 years old, back in 2010. I was still at that age where curiosity outweighed common sense, especially when it came to impressing friends. I lived in a normal neighborhood, the kind where kids rode bikes until dark and went back and forth between each other's houses without much thought. One of my closest friends lived just a few houses away, and we spent most afternoons together. One day, he told me he had found something strange. His older brother was away at college, and while digging through his stuff, my friend came across a Ouija board. He didn't really know what it was at first, but he had heard enough about it to know that it was supposed to be spooky. He explained it to me in that excited, half-serious way kids do when they think they've discovered something forbidden. Then he asked me if I wanted to play it with him. I hesitated for a split second, but I didn't want to seem scared. Trying to impress him, I said yes, like it was no big deal. I told myself it was probably fake anyway. So we went into his room, closed the door, and laid the board out on the floor. The first time, nothing happened. We followed the basic instructions printed on the box, placed our fingers on the planchette, and asked a few questions. It didn't move. The room stayed quiet. No strange sounds, no feelings, nothing. After a while, we got bored and disappointed. It felt like we had been tricked by stories meant to scare kids. Later that week, my friend called me. He sounded excited again. He told me he had looked up how to properly use the board online and wanted to try it one more time, the right way. By that point, I was even more confident that nothing would happen. The first attempt had convinced me it was all nonsense, so I agreed without much hesitation. That second time felt very different from the start. We gathered a bunch of scented candles from around the house and placed them in a rough circle around the board. We turned off the lights and sat cross-legged on the floor. Even though I didn't really believe anything would happen, the atmosphere felt heavier. The room smelled strongly of wax and artificial scents, and the flickering candlelight made shadows crawl along the walls. We put our fingers on the planchette and asked if anyone was there. Almost immediately, it moved to yes. Both of us froze. At first we laughed nervously. We assumed the other person was pushing it as a joke. We accused each other for a moment, but neither of us admitted to it. Eventually, we agreed to take it seriously, at least for the moment. I didn't really care either way. If it was fake, fine. If it wasn't, I didn't think about the consequences yet. We asked what its name was. The planchette moved slowly, spelling out O-W-E-N. My friend asked if it was a person. The answer went to no. We asked what it was. The board spelled out D-E-M-O-N. That word alone made my stomach drop. I still tried to act brave, but my heart was racing now. To this day, I don't know why I said what I said next, but I did. I asked it to prove it. Almost immediately after, we heard something come from the garage. The sound is hard to describe, but if you've ever heard the call they play at the beginning of the show, Finding Bigfoot, that's the closest comparison I can make. It was loud, deep, and unnatural. Not quite an animal, not quite a human. It echoed through the house in a way that made it feel massive. We both screamed and bolted out of the room, running straight out of the house. We stood outside, shaking, too scared to even speak. After a few minutes, we worked up the courage to go back inside and check the garage. There was nothing there. No animals, no signs of forced entry, nothing out of place. A few weeks passed after that, but things didn't go back to normal. My friends started telling me about things that were happening in his house. He said that whenever he was downstairs, especially in the kitchen or living room, he felt like he was being watched. Not just a vague feeling, but the strong sensation that something was aware of him. At night, he said he felt someone sit on the end of his bed, pressing the mattress down like a real weight. The scariest part was the garage. Every time he walked past it, he said he felt something grab his wrist and try to pull him toward it. He started avoiding that part of the house entirely. When I went over to visit, I felt strange too. I always had the feeling that something was watching me from above, like from the ceiling or corners of the room. It didn't feel imaginary. It felt wrong, unnatural in a way that made my skin crawl. Then came the worst night of all. We were in his room playing a game we called Army, using toy soldiers and making up scenarios. No one else was home. The house was quiet, just the two of us talking and moving pieces around. Suddenly, we heard heavy footsteps downstairs. At first, we thought it might be his parents coming home early. But the sound was wrong. Whatever was walking didn't sound like it had feet. It sounded like hooves. The footsteps were slow, heavy, and deliberate. I, like a full-grown horse, was walking around inside the house. Each step made a deep thud against the floor. Then, mixed in with the footsteps, we heard something else. Someone was laughing and coughing at the same time. It was a wet, broken sound, like the person making it was struggling to breathe. My friend jumped up and slammed the bedroom door shut. We didn't even talk about it. Panic took over completely. He dove under his bed, pulling his blankets with him. I ran into his closet and shut the door, squeezing myself into the corner between hanging clothes. That's when we heard scratching. Something began scratching at his bedroom door with one large claw. The sound was slow and deliberate, dragging down the door over and over again. The only thing I can compare it to is the large curved claw on a raptor's foot. It sounded sharp, powerful, and patient. My friend started crying. I was on the verge of tears myself. Pressing my hands over my mouth to keep from making any noise. My heart was pounding so hard, it felt like it might give me away. My friend yelled through his sobs, telling it to leave us alone. He called it Owen by name, saying that it was scaring us. Almost immediately, the scratching stopped. The footsteps returned. heavy and fast this time, and we heard whatever it was run down the stairs. The sound faded, leaving the house completely silent again. After a moment, my friend crawled out from under the bed. His face was pale and he was shaking, but there was something determined in his expression. He ran to the closet, threw the door open, and practically dragged me out. He grabbed the Ouija board, which had been sitting in the closet the whole time. Without saying a word, he ran downstairs. I followed him, terrified but not wanting to be alone. He went straight to the gas fireplace. In a panic, he ripped the screen door off, threw the board inside, put the screen back on, and reached to turn the fireplace on. Before he could, we heard a loud moan come from the basement. The basement was directly behind him. The sound was deep, full of pain and anger, and it echoed up the stairs. Without hesitating, he flicked the switch. The fireplace roared to life, and the Ouija board began to burn. That was it. The house went quiet. No more footsteps, no more sounds, nothing. We didn't go back upstairs. We went outside and stayed there until his parents got home. He refused to step foot back inside the house alone. When his parents found out what he had done, they were furious. He got grounded, and the remains of the board were thrown away. But after that night, the strange experiences stopped. The feeling of being watched disappeared. Nothing grabbed him anymore. Nothing sat on his bed. The house felt normal again. That was the end of it. And that's why, no matter how curious I might be, I will never take part in one of those games again. Whatever people want to believe about it, I know what I experienced. I know how real it felt. And I know that some doors, once open, aren't meant to be tested again. My mom has always loved going to auctions. It's one of her hobbies, something she's done for as long as I can remember. She likes the thrill of it, the randomness, the feeling that you might stumble across something interesting or valuable without meaning to. Most of the time, she comes home with harmless stuff. Old dishes, boxes of books, random decorations, things like that. Nothing strange, nothing dangerous. One day she went to her local auction like usual. She walked around, looked through different lots, and eventually settled on a box that had a few items she liked. She didn't inspect it too closely. She rarely does. She won the auction, brought the box home, and set it aside to go through later. When she finally opened it, that's when she found the Ouija board. It wasn't hidden or wrapped up. It was just there, mixed in with the other items like it belonged there. She didn't think much of it at first. To her, it was just another old game board someone didn't want anymore. She put it away, and life went on. Fast forward to Thanksgiving in 2018. I came home to visit, staying with her for the holiday. At that point in my life, I wasn't particularly spiritual, and I definitely wasn't someone who believed easily in paranormal things. I was curious, sure, but skeptical. Part of that skepticism came from something that had happened years earlier. When I was around 13, I somehow found a Ouija board in my room. To this day, I don't know how it got there. I tried using it by myself, mostly out of boredom and curiosity, and absolutely nothing happened. No movement, no feelings, nothing at all. Because of that experience, I never really took Ouija boards seriously. So when I remembered my mom had one now, something in me wanted to try again. This time, not alone. This time, with another person. I told myself that if nothing happened again, I would just confirm what I already believed, that it was all nonsense. I suggested we play it together. At first, she was hesitant. She didn't love the idea, but she wasn't completely against it either. I pushed a little harder than I probably should have. I told her it would be fine, that we'd be careful, that it was just a game. Eventually, she agreed. I insisted we do it properly. I had been reading online about how people claimed you were supposed to set the mood. And even though I didn't fully believe it, part of me wanted to take it seriously. We lit tea candles and placed them in a circle around us. We turned off the lights so the room was lit only by the flickering candles. The atmosphere immediately felt different, heavier somehow. We also put the dog in the kitchen and blocked the doorway with a baby gate. That detail matters. Before we even started, the dog hated the board. He wouldn't go near it. He whined, paced, and stared at it like it was something alive. No matter how much we tried to calm him down, he refused to relax until we separated him from us and the board. Even then, he kept barking and whining from the other room. Once everything was set, we sat down and placed our fingers on the planchette. At first, nothing happened. Then we started asking questions. We learned, or at least believed, that we were talking to a boy. He said he was 7 years old. His name was Tom. The planchette moved slowly and deliberately, spelling things out in a way that didn't feel random. I remember feeling uneasy, but still trying to stay logical about it. Then something happened that made my stomach drop. Tom started moving the planchette quickly through numbers, not spelling anything, not answering a question, just moving haphazardly from one number to another. I had recently read that this was something you were never supposed to allow, that it was considered a bad sign, a warning. I panicked. I immediately said we needed to stop. We rushed to say goodbye, ending the session as quickly as we could. The moment we did, something inside me broke. I was suddenly overwhelmed with fear. There was no reason for it. Nothing had changed in the room. Nothing jumped out at us. But I was flooded with the most intense panic I had ever felt in my life. I started sobbing uncontrollably. My chest felt tight. My thoughts were spiraling. But I couldn't pinpoint why. I kept telling my mom that something was wrong, that it didn't feel right, that I didn't feel right. I wasn't scared of a specific thing. I was just terrified. And then, just as suddenly as it started, it stopped. The panic drained out of me, leaving me exhausted and confused. I wiped my face, took a few shaky breaths, and tried to make sense of what had just happened. Instead of taking it as a warning, instead of stopping right there, I did something incredibly stupid. I insisted we do it again. My mom tried to say no. She reminded me of how upset I'd just been. She told me it didn't seem like a good idea. But I was strangely calm now, almost detached. I pushed again, and against her better judgment, she agreed. We reset everything. This time, I asked if Tom was with us. The planchette moved to number 1. I asked who was there. It stayed on number 1. I tried asking the same question in different ways. What's your name? How old are you? Are you a good spirit? Are you bad? Every time, the planchette stayed firmly on no. It felt wrong. There was no hesitation, no wandering movement, just no, over and over again. Then something happened that I didn't even realize was happening at the time. The planchette began moving in a figure 8, an infinity symbol. This is another thing you're supposedly never supposed to let happen. It's considered extremely dangerous. But in that moment, I wasn't reacting at all. According to my mom, I was staring straight at the board. I completely zoned out. My eyes were open, but I wasn't really there. From my perspective, it was like everything went blank. I couldn't see the board. I couldn't see the movement. It was like my brain had shut off whatever part of me was supposed to be paying attention. My mom was yelling at me, telling me we needed to say goodbye, telling me to stop it. I didn't respond. I didn't move. I didn't even acknowledge her. She screamed at me again, louder this time. and shoved the planchette to goodbye while saying it herself forcefully. She told me to say it. When I finally responded, my voice didn't sound like my own. It was very quiet, very soft, almost gentle, completely emotionless. I said goodbye like it didn't matter at all. Afterwards, she was furious and terrified at the same time. She asked me why I wouldn't do anything, why I wouldn't respond to her. I told her the truth. I didn't know what was happening. I didn't see the board moving. I didn't even know it had been. She insisted there was no way that could be true. She said I was staring right at it, that my eyes never left it. But I genuinely hadn't seen a thing. Another detail that still bothers me is that the spirits wouldn't answer her. Not even Tom. When she asked questions, the board didn't move. When I asked the same questions, it reacted immediately, every time. Looking back, that scares me more than anything else. Despite everything that happened, I still chose to play with a Ouija board again. After a dissociative panic attack so intense, it left me sobbing on the floor. I should have listened to my body. I should have taken that reaction as a warning, but I didn't. After that night, things in my mom's house got worse. Not immediately, not all at once, but slowly, unmistakably. She started having experiences she couldn't explain. Sounds, feelings, a sense that something was wrong in her home. Then one day, she found something that stopped her cold. There was a bloody footprint in her downstairs bathroom. It didn't belong to anyone who lived there. The size didn't match any of our feet. And the placement made no sense. It wasn't leading into the room or out of it. It was coming from between the washer and dryer, like something had stepped out from that narrow space. There was no blood anywhere else, just the footprint. To this day, I don't have a good explanation for what happened. I don't know if it was psychological, environmental, or something else entirely. All I know is that something changed after we played that board. Something followed through instead of ending when we said goodbye. And that's why, no matter how curious I might ever feel again, I will never touch one of those boards as long as I live. I was 13 years old, living in Queens, New York, in a quiet neighborhood that sat close to the water. It was the kind of place where nothing ever really happened, where nights felt calm and familiar, and where kids like me felt safe being outside longer than we probably should have. That summer, my bike was everything to me. I rode it every chance I got, especially my BMX. I'm practicing small tricks in front of my house until my legs burned and my hands were sore from gripping the handlebars too tightly. That night started like any other. I remember the air being warm but not uncomfortable. The kind of late summer night where the city noise fades just enough for you to hear the water in the distance. The streetlights cast long yellow shadows across the pavement, and most of the houses around me were already dark. It was getting late, close to 11 at night, and I knew I should head inside soon. My parents didn't like me being out that late, even though I was just right outside. I told myself I would do one last thing before calling it a night. Near my neighborhood, there was a waterfront trail that ran alongside the water. It wasn't anything special, just a narrow path with a few trees scattered along it, but I liked riding there because it felt peaceful and private. At night, it was usually empty. No cars, no people, just the sound of my tires rolling over the ground and the quiet movement of the water nearby. I pedaled toward the trail, feeling relaxed and completely unaware that anything strange was about to happen. My mind was focused on nothing important. School, friends, video games, the usual thoughts of a 13-year-old kid. I remember feeling calm, even a little happy, enjoying the freedom of being alone with my bike in the quiet night. I rode the length of the trail without any issues. Nothing felt off at first. When I reached the end and started slowing down, that was when I noticed something ahead of me. Near one of the trees, standing just off the path, was a woman dressed in a white gown. At first, I didn't think much of it. Queens is full of strange sights, and my brain tried to make sense of it quickly. Maybe she was part of a photo shoot. Maybe someone was playing a prank. Maybe she was just standing there, and the lighting made her look odd. But something about the way she stood made me uneasy. She wasn't moving at all, not shifting her weight, not adjusting her posture. Just standing there, perfectly still. I slowed my bike to a stop, staring at her from a distance. The gown was long and white, hanging straight down, almost blending into the darkness around her, except where the moonlight touched it. Her hair appeared dark, falling around where her face should have been. That was when I realized something was wrong. I couldn't see her face. At first I told myself I was too far away. The lighting wasn't great, and maybe my eyes were playing tricks on me. I leaned forward slightly on my bike, squinting, trying to make out her features. Eyes, a nose, a mouth, anything. But there was nothing there. Just smoothness, like her face had been erased. My heart started to beat faster, but I still didn't panic. Kids rationalize things quickly, especially when fear doesn't make sense yet. Oh man, I thought maybe it was a mannequin. Maybe someone had dumped it there for some weird reason. Or maybe she was wearing a mask that blended into the darkness. To test it, I shouted out, "Hey!" My voice echoed slightly in the quiet night. The sound felt louder than it should have been. The woman didn't react. She didn't turn her head. She didn't move. She didn't acknowledge me at all. That was when the fear really started to settle in. A deep, uncomfortable feeling crept into my chest. The kind that tells you something isn't right even when you can't explain why. I should have turned around right then. I know that now. But curiosity, mixed with disbelief, pushed me forward. I slowly pedaled closer. With every rotation of the wheels, my body felt tighter. 10 feet. That's all the closer I got. About 10 feet away from her, close enough that there was no denying what I was seeing. She had no face. There were no shadows hiding features. No mask lines. No movement that suggested a trick. Just a blank, smooth surface where a face should have been. I remember feeling dizzy, like my brain couldn't process what my eyes were seeing. My hands tightened on the handlebars, and I stopped breathing for a moment without realizing it. Then her head turned toward me. It wasn't fast. It wasn't dramatic. It was slow and deliberate, as if she had finally noticed me and decided to acknowledge my presence. That single movement shattered whatever calm I had left. I didn't scream. I didn't shout. I didn't think. I took off. I pedaled harder than I ever had in my life. My legs burned. My lungs felt like they were going to explode, and my heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I didn't look back. I didn't want to know if she was following me or if she had moved at all. I just wanted to get home. When I reached my house, I practically threw my bike down and ran inside, slamming the door behind me. I stood there for a moment, shaking, listening for any sound outside. Nothing followed me. The house was quiet, normal, safe. I didn't tell anyone what I saw, not my parents, not my friends, not even myself, really. I pushed it down, convinced myself that I had imagined it, that fear and darkness had combined to create something that wasn't real. Over time, the memory faded into something uncomfortable but distant. Years passed and I grew up. Life moved on. 10 years later, I got a call from a childhood friend. We were talking about old memories, the neighborhood, how things used to be. Somehow, the waterfront trail came up in the conversation. There was a pause on the line before he said something that made my stomach drop. He asked me if I had ever seen anything strange there. I didn't answer right away. I asked him what he meant. His voice changed when he spoke again, lower and more serious. He told me that one night, not long before that call, he had been near the trail and saw a woman standing by a tree wearing a white gown. My entire body went cold. He told me she had no face. I didn't interrupt him. I let him talk, let him explain how he froze in place, how fear washed over him, how he ran as soon as she turned her head toward him. Every detail matched my experience from 10 years earlier. Same spot, same gown, same impossible absence of a face. That was the first time I ever told anyone about what I saw. And 1 year after that conversation, something even darker happened. A mutual friend of ours, someone we had grown up with, someone who knew that neighborhood as well as we did, took his own life. He shot himself in the head just a few feet from the exact spot where both of us had seen the faceless woman. There was no note that explained why, no warning signs that made sense afterward. Just shock, grief, and a question that none of us could answer. I still think about that night sometimes, about the girl I was at 13, riding her bike without a care in the world, and how one moment changed something inside me forever. I don't know what that woman was. I don't know if she was connected to what happened years later. I don't know if some places hold on to things that we don't understand. All I know is that whatever stood by that tree didn't feel like a prank or a trick or something human. And even now, years later, I avoid that waterfront trail when the sun goes down. If you're still here, then these stories didn't simply fade away. They settled in. Every story you heard tonight came from real moments, real people, and real situations where something felt off or nearly went wrong. If you want to keep exploring stories that linger in your thoughts long after the night grows quiet, consider subscribing to Midnight Whispers. There are more stories waiting in the dark, and not all of them let you leave in time.